if you watched PWF Empire Live last week, you would have heard me go on a big-ass rant about the current state of WWE. And I don't rant too much. I only rant on things that I care enough about to rant on. And you kind of have to wonder, what is it about wrestling that would make me even feel that passionate about it? And I talked about all of the different range of emotions that come into play, the happiness, the frustration, the anger sometimes, the joy, the jubilation, and seeing professional wrestling. So at this time, I would love it if you guys engage in a conversation with us about why you are a fan of wrestling. If I was to answer that question, why am I a fan of wrestling? It's kind of tough to answer. I guess I could only sum it up in one way. Professional wrestling is weird as hell. And I have some weird quirks about me, so I guess that they just come together so nicely. I remember my first time ever watching WWE. It was February 22nd, 1999. I was actually watching Nitro. I was a fan of WCW, and the funny thing about that is I barely remember anything about WCW. I only know that I liked a few wrestlers. Let's see, it was DDP, Conan, Billy Kidman, Kevin Nash, and Disco Inferno. That is the weirdest fucking Fave 5 of all time. And I don't know, like, it's so weird. I cannot tell you one, and of course, I've gone back and watched some of their matches, but I cannot tell you at that time one match that I actually remember watching. The only thing that I remember about WCW, there was this one segment on the show where it was Ric Flair, Eric Bischoff, and a bunch of other people out there in the arena, and they were like around a limo. That's all the information I have. Eric Bischoff, Ric Flair, and a limo. If you guys know what the fuck I'm talking about, please let me know. Send me a clip on YouTube. But yeah,
oh man, that was the famous Eric Bischoff, Ric Flair, and limo segment. I know what you're talking about.
See, yeah, you get it. Now, like, that's why I'm here. That one segment, it was so awesome. Like, what, 16 years later? Bam. But yeah,
the limo really got depushed after that, though. They didn't strike while the iron was hot.
So my first exposure to WWE, though, I remember this one as if it was yesterday. February 22nd, 1999. My cousin came over to my house. We were watching Nitro, and she was like, hey, you guys should change the channel to channel 49. I even remember the freaking channel. She was like, change the channel to 49 and watch this show called Monday Night Raw, or Raw's War, whatever it was at the time. So I watch, and the very first match that I ever see, The Undertaker versus Kane, an Inferno match. What a fucking introduction to the wide, wide world of WWF. An Inferno match between The Undertaker and Kane, and that was at the time where Undertaker was obsessed with Stephanie, and he was stalking her and different things like that. So just all of that stuff coming together, and just the pageantry and the eccentricness of wrestling and the joy that it can give you. And I honestly believe that wrestling is a very unique thing, and I don't think that there's any other form of entertainment that has given me as much joy in wrestling. Like, when wrestling is at its best, there is barely anything in the world that's better than that. So that's why I'm a wrestling fan.
The uniqueness of wrestling is something that I'm just so fascinated by, because there's no other form of storytelling where there's this almost two-way creation of it, where the things that take place in the ring are fictional, but the surrounding audience is not fictional, and the surrounding audience gives its input to the fictional universe, and the fictional universe gives its this output back, and then there's this simultaneous creation of something. And it borders on this strange limbo between fiction and reality, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so captivated by it, is because it's not entirely fake, but it's not real either. I mean, we all know that, but it functions on this middle realm where everything is larger than life, and you could come out and talk trash about your opponent in front of this large audience, and there's evil people, there's dark magicians. I mean, it's just insane. And it's also because I think we all have this thing that carries over in us from childhood, which is that we like to make believe and we like to play pretend. And wrestling is the only form of entertainment that I can really think of that's somewhat mainstream, in which adults have permission to play pretend. And they do that
That's
by
very interesting.
they do that by going to the show and getting invested in these matches that they know are fake, but they still have real emotions about them. And I just think that's so bizarre and so awesome.
That's where I think like the sports entertainment blend is so awesome. I love that because it's like it is sports in the same way, because at a sporting game, at a baseball game, or a football game, or a hockey game, basketball game, any sport, you get up and cheer. Like if the guy hits a home run on your team, you're going to stand up and you are going to cheer and you are going to be excited. Just like if your favorite wrestler hits his finisher, you are going to stand up and cheer. Or if your favorite wrestler beats his opponent, you are going to stand up and cheer. And that's where I think it's so cool. And I think that wrestling represents, like, and people like to call it the male soap opera, and I think that is an accurate way of describing
it. Term, honestly. Though,
I know you don't, because we're guys and we can't watch soap operas because we are guys.
I'm saying no. What are you saying? That's complete opposite. No, I actually do watch soap operas. That's why.
Good. I'm glad you watch soap operas. That's good.
General Hospital is my fucking show. Man, I love General Hospital.
Good. All right, I'm glad you like soap operas. I think that's a stupid thing that like guys think. Oh well, I can't watch a soap opera because I'm a guy. But who cares? It tells a story very similarly to that. And I'm not saying that that's the most accurate way to describe wrestling. I just think it's kind of true in a way, because you have good guys and bad guys and stories, and that's what makes it cool. Is it's storytelling. It's like reliving your childhood as an adult. It's like being in your childhood when you're a kid, and that's why I got so swept up by it, because it was like all these larger than life things, like these masked characters, like, even Mankind being like, wow, this guy is so crazy, like so different, and Undertaker with his ridiculous entrance that as a kid almost scares you, and when you get older it just gives you, chills because of how like crazy it is and how otherworldly it feels. And some of the matches that got me going into it was anything Stone Cold Steve Austin, because I was watching wrestling on my TV, like my dad would flip it on or whatever, when I was a little tiny kid. And, obviously you don't remember the exact matches and things like that, but it was just always interesting because I was a kid who loved, violent video games or fighting shows like Dragon Ball Z and things like that. I fucking love that shit. Like that shit was my shit. So wrestling represented that same kind of thing, like violence on TV. It was like, ooh, this is cool. And Stone Cold was like the baddest ass motherfucker of all time. So obviously I was instantly like, man, this guy, like, even as a little kid, you're just like, that's who I want to be in 20 years. It's not exactly what your mom and dad want you to be in 20 years, a beer drinking, middle finger flipping, stunning son of a bitch, that's not what your parents want you to be, but it certainly is something that you were like, man, this is just so cool because it's the most badass thing. And I mean, I used to love the action figures. I still have a set of WCW action figures with DDP, Goldberg, and Sting, and who else was it? And I think Kevin Nash, and they actually talk to each other. And as a little kid, I used to be like going nuts about that. And all these different action figures and things like that was that just got me that much more into wrestling because I could interact with them, and I had all the fake props, steel chairs, and all that, and tables and things like that. I mean, I don't have a lot of that stuff anymore, but that just was like my childhood in a nutshell, was action figures and loving what I saw on TV. And obviously, as I got a little older, I started to actually get into the storylines and everything, and it's been all from there. It's been up and down. You've had good moments, not so good moments, and everything else,
But I think overall in wrestling, and we kind of talked about this a little off air, Steven, wrestling gives me more joy than it will ever give me any kind of frustration. Like when I look at the product overall, because just me sitting here right now, this world has been created because of wrestling. I wouldn't even be on this show. I wouldn't know you guys. I wouldn't know some of my best friends in the friggin' world were it not for wrestling, and just being able to make those connections with people and the different ways that wrestling affects your life as you grow up. Because I remember how wrestling affected me differently when I was a kid versus right now. Like I had all of those action figures, and I even had a Kevin Nash where if you if you like squeezed his legs, his arm went up to do like the power bomb, so it was kind of like the Kung Fu grip with the GI Joes and things like that. Yeah, I had a Kevin Nash that did that. But yeah, going back to something that you said, Evan, talking about Undertaker's entrance almost scaring you as a kid, there was no almost for me. Like I've said this, and I am not ashamed to admit it at all. There was no boogeyman when I was a kid. The Undertaker was the friggin' boogeyman, and I would have nightmares about that guy. You remember that symbol that he used to have back in the Attitude Era? It's like the TX symbol. I think he sacrificed Stephanie on there once.
Yes,
I used to have
that was some
nightmares.
scary shit.
Yes, I used to have nightmares about being sacrificed on there. I used to have nightmares about him. Like, I don't know how I got in this situation, but I would be in an arena all by myself, and The Undertaker would suddenly appear out of nowhere and drag me under the ring. And for whatever reason, me being terrified of The Undertaker, I still watched every damn week because wrestling, back then, it was kind of like horror movie, a little bit of escapism with Stone Cold Steve Austin. You talk about wanting to be Stone Cold Steve Austin in 20 years. Hell, when I was watching The Attitude Era, I wanted to be him right then. Just imagine going up against some type of authority, whether it be a lunch aide at school or a teacher or something like that. I remember they used to try to take my Pokemon cards and stuff like that, and I used to go back and forth between, having visions of Pikachu giving them the Thunder Shock or, giving them a Stone Cold Stunner, stuff like that. So...
And I started watching wrestling in about 1999, 2000, but I was never scared of The Undertaker. I was actually the only guy who I've ever been scared of in wrestling was Brock Lesnar. I don't know why, but I was still pretty young when he debuted, and
I'm scared of him now.
I remember when I went to the live events, I used to be scared that he would come in the audience and just beat me up because that just seemed like the kind of guy he was, and I guess that's the kind of guy he is.
Are you all have any other wrestling memories that stick out in your mind? I know one for me. It's one that will never, ever be referenced on TV ever again. But the chapel with Stephanie and Triple H, I love that moment so much. And I look back and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't love it as much as I did because I didn't really understand what was going on when I was a kid. But now I know. And that's kind of a little against the law, but... it was still entertaining back then, and I look upon it fondly. And just going back and Stephanie being involved in the very first moment that I saw on WWE TV, Undertaker, he burned a teddy bear that actually belonged to Stephanie, and storyline wise, of course. But yeah, just everything that happened in that one moment and seeing how all of it played out throughout the years, and Triple H and Stephanie, how them starting out as a storyline, moving to a real life relationship, and now they're in power positions backstage in WWE and they're the authority on air. Just being able to follow those stories throughout the years, and man, it's so friggin' amazing. And I love being a part of this world, even if I have a very small little piece of it with what I do here on YouTube. I just love being a part of the wrestling world.
Man, one thing I really like about wrestling is that it is such a large-scale, long-term story that they're telling. One thing I really like is looking at the relationship between Randy Orton and Triple H, because those guys have so much history that it's pretty interesting to look back on, especially in their recent alliance when Triple H would talk about how he finally molded Randy Orton into the diamond that he set out to mold in Evolution. It's that's the definition of continuity, man. I know WWE doesn't do continuity often, but when it does, it could do some crazy stuff, 10 years of continuity, which is ridiculous. But they could do that because that's just the type of medium that we're working with.
Oh, totally. I think that's always so crazy. Things like that. But honestly, a lot of the things when I was a kid were just larger than life because you're a kid and because you just see it as so different from anything else. And I remember some of those hardcore championship times when there'd be 100 title changes, and I remember being a little kid and just being jumping up and down because it was so crazy.
That's the most awesome thing in the world.
All this somebody go even seeing a Mae Young go through a power bomb through its table by the Dudleys, and oh man, the Hardy Boys and Dudleys and Edge and Christian, their matches. Oh, those were always some of my favorites from when I was young because of all the violence, all the table bumps, everything like that. That was what got me really excited, more than anything else, because I was just yes, oh my God, somebody got hurt. It's as bad as that sounds. When you're a little kid, that is what you love. I mean, man, it just. And you could say that's some people like to be on the bandwagon of, oh, you can't expose kids to this, violent stuff. And it's my childhood would have been empty without these violent TV shows.
I'm fine now.
Yeah, I'm
I
awesome
totally
now.
Don't murder complete strangers in GTA and just randomly run down the street shanking people. I don't do that. So
never ever.
Shooting them with flare guns and watching them catch on.
Oh yeah, flare guns. When you fire it and it comes out, woo!
There we go. That was an amazing segue. Yeah.
Yes.
Bam.
Yes.